Hi, welcome back to another episode of the podcast, Nobody's Doing It Right. I'm your host, Kat. Welcome back. For today's episode, I want to talk about how when you don't value yourself, you overvalue those who don't value you. And I think this is an important topic when it comes to self-concept. This did really well on my TikTok and my Instagram, and I think because it resonates with so many people, and I think a lot of us need to hear it from time to time. Valuing yourself is not like this moral thing, right? Like you're a bad person if you don't value yourself. It's more about how you see yourself then determines what you see in others and how you see others. It skews your perception. It makes you wear these rose-colored glasses. And so what happens often, as I've experienced myself, as I've seen through other people that I've talked to and understood their experience with this, if you don't value yourself, you feel like internally you don't have that sense of self-worth, that you don't think you are worthy, good enough, valuable in some way, you will seek out people, or maybe not even seek out, but mostly notice people who don't value you because they offer the perfect opportunity for you to prove your value to them. So you might be meeting a whole bunch of people in your life, and some will value you, but the ones that don't are the ones that you notice the most if you don't value yourself. Because again, they offer you the opportunity to prove your value. So if you don't feel like you have this intrinsic sense of value, you feel like, okay, I have to get it externally, right? It has to be extrinsic. And so I have to prove it. I have to get somebody or something, some opportunity, whatever, to say to me, you are valuable, to reflect it back to me because I can't see it in myself. And so that's why we use people, and I don't mean use in like necessarily a negative sense or a malicious sense, but we use people, opportunities, experiences to see parts of ourselves that we don't feel like we have. And value is one of those things. So you might encounter certain people who maybe make you feel like you have to hunt a little bit, right? It's a bit of a chase, or you feel like, okay, how can I show myself to be this perfect version of myself? And if I do that, then they'll be there. Then they'll stay. Then they'll turn around and say, you are the one. Whatever those narratives are to you. It can manifest in so many different ways for so many different people. It really just depends on how it shows up for you. These are just a few examples I'm using. And so I think it's really important to notice that, because if not, you might catch yourself ending up in relationships constantly where there is this kind of push-pull, but almost you having to try and find ways to get closer to somebody, find ways to show that you are good enough to be in connection with somebody. And so then those people become your primary focus, and then they become more important to you than in a way that you are to yourself. They become overvalued in your mind because of the lack of value you feel you have. And so then all of your worth is determined by them and their presence in your life and how willing they are to be there or to show up for you. And oftentimes when this happens, if this is the dynamic you're finding yourself in, that person won't be there for you, because if they were, it wouldn't work within this paradigm of a lack of self-value and self-worth. So it's often with a person who is not very present, who might be there, with a lot of scarcity. Maybe they're there sometimes, maybe they're not. Maybe they require you to have to feel like you need to do more to get their attention. And that's not fair to you. It's not very kind to you to put yourself in that position. And this isn't, again, to blame you or shame you for being in this position. It's more to just bring awareness to the fact that maybe it is because of a low self-worth and a low self-value. And again, this is normal. Like, we're humans. Of course, at times we're going to feel this way. It's not always easy to know to feel like you have value, let alone know what it is, especially if you haven't been taught how to do it, right? If you've watched your parents or caregivers or family or whoever, your environment, your colleagues, your peers struggle with this too, then of course you're not going to know how to do it. And also, what value is going to be different for everybody, right? What you think is valuable internally in yourself is going to be different than what somebody else sees in themselves and what they deem to be worthwhile or valuable about them. So it's important also to get clear on what that is for you. This is why I always say journaling is so great for that. I'm such a huge advocate for journaling. I know it can be hard to begin the process of it because it's like, where do I even start? You just start. You really just sit down and start writing about yourself and talking to yourself, and starting with something that is happening in your life right now, something that you're noticing about yourself. And use it as an opportunity to really dissect yourself, to get to know yourself. It's not necessarily kind of a diary in terms of what you're doing, but that could be part of it too. Like, I did this today. Sure, you can document your life, but I think when it comes to personal development, self-awareness, you have to really just dig into yourself and have a conversation with yourself and be honest and vulnerable with yourself before you can be that way with anybody else. And so often I find that when you start doing this journaling, again, as I've experienced through my own life and my own process in journaling, you will begin to notice the parts of yourself that don't feel valuable or good enough. They'll start screaming at you from the page. You'll see them. And I think once you put them down on paper, they become more tangible and you can actually then pinpoint them. Like, okay, this is the thing. This is why I don't feel valuable, because of this thing that I have, or this thing that I am, or whatever it is for you, or this belief, or this narrative that my family has told me my whole life, or whatever. It could be anything, but it's important to get clear on what that is for you. And then you have to start showing yourself reasons why you are valuable. Now, I think when we use the word value, high value, low value, especially in like the online world when it comes to relationships, we often think of like transactions, right? We think of what's a valuable transaction to have with a person. What do you give? What do you bring to the table? What do I get from you? And while, of course, relationships are transactional to an extent, we are kind of giving and taking from each other. That's part of interdependence. Like, we have to be that way, of course, and it is normal. I don't think we should look at value as something that makes you worthy of a transaction. I think that's where it can get a bit messy, right? So it's saying like, if I were valuable enough, this person would give me a relationship, or this person would give me these things, or this kind of experience. That gets a bit messy because it's really not necessarily about you, whether or not somebody shows up a certain way. Often, the narrative of if they wanted to, they would. I don't necessarily believe in that. Sure, some of us don't do things we don't want to do, of course. But when it comes to relationships, it's so much more nuanced and complex than this and that, right? The black and white. Sometimes it can be very simple, sure, but other times it's not just about you and what you do and who you are that dictates how a person shows up for you. That person might just be a person who doesn't want to show up in relationships the way you need somebody to show up in relationships. And that has nothing to do with you and your value. But if you believe that you have low value, then you will assume that that's the reason. And then you'll feel the need to have to prove to them why you're valuable enough for them to show up in the way you want them to. Even though they might not be capable of it, they might not see relationships in the way that you see relationships. They might not be a person who wants to even be that kind of person. There are so many reasons why that could be happening. So you might find yourself feeling like, okay, I have to really pedestalize this person. And well, you don't really do that consciously. Actually, you do that unconsciously. You start pedestalizing them because of the attention you're giving them. You're overvaluing them in relation to your own value because you want to prove yourself to them. Now, all of a sudden, they're much higher in ranking in your own life compared to you. And so you get very stressed and anxious and triggered by their lack of attention. Or if they do give you attention, then it becomes this, exciting experience or moment that then is fleeting, right? Because it won't last. So it creates this very skewed perception you have of yourself and of this person in your life. When, in reality, I think, again, just from my own opinion, when it comes to relationships and the relationships I've experienced and the dynamics I've been in, I think really what it comes down to is just a neutrality, right? When we experience people, of course, it's meant to be exciting. It should be fun, sure. But when it comes to this mentality of valuing, overvaluing, seeing this person as really important because they hold something about you, that they'll prove it to you if they're there, that's not healthy and it's not sustainable. It's not going to last, because then what happens if that person does turn around and say, okay, you are valuable, and that prayer is answered for you, then the entire dynamic falls flat because it doesn't exist anymore in the way that it was functioning before. Because you can't get that value from someone else. You can't be proven it by somebody else. It only comes from you. Which means, of course, if you were to practice valuing yourself or understanding where your value is internally, the way you see relationships and people will change. So somebody that you might be seeing right now who is giving you that opportunity to prove your worth, right? And you start overvaluing them. They become really important. You're scared to say the wrong thing at the wrong time because they might, leave or whatever. You won't see that person as someone attractive to you if you're in a position where you do value yourself. You find that internal value. it won't make sense to be in relationship with that kind of person because you don't need to prove your value to them. So their scarcity, their avoidance, their 1 foot in, 1 foot outness, it doesn't make sense for you because it's like, why would I be here then? The only reason you were there before is because of not feeling like you have value. So it completely shifts the way you see yourself, other people, relationships. And so it's important to understand where that issue with value comes from for you. Dissect it, get clear on it, understand it, and then try and find ways to prove to yourself that belief that you lack value, that it's wrong. How can you prove that to yourself? Gather evidence of things in your life that show you that you do have value, that you are important, that you are good. I think we sometimes overvalue the things that we think don't give us value, right? We overvalue our mistakes, our imperfections, our issues, whatever. And we don't overvalue the good things about ourselves. We forget those. And that's why, again, I think journaling is really helpful for that. Because if you can sit down and write out all the things about yourself that are positive, that you've succeeded at, that you've gained throughout your life, you'll realize like, oh, I actually have a huge list of things that would make another person feel valuable to me if I were to see this list about them. So why do I not feel that way about myself? It kind of then dismantles the self-concept you have because you're seeing evidence to the contrary. So then it doesn't make sense to not value yourself as much anymore. Sometimes you just have to see it. And then it slowly, subconsciously shifts the perception you have of yourself. And then that changes the way you relate to people. So if you are finding yourself in a dynamic where you are really maybe obsessed with a person, if you want to use that wording, whatever wording you want to use, you're overvaluing them, you're worried about saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, being imperfect and that affecting the relationship, I think it might be a sign that you have a low self-value, and maybe you're already aware of that. And if you are already aware that you have that belief about yourself, it's important to then remind yourself that if you continue in this way, you will continue to overvalue people who don't value you, meaning you won't show yourself a relationship that can mirror your own self-worth and value that you should have for yourself, right? Like you should be able to show yourself that. And it's a kind thing to show yourself that. So why continue on in this pattern knowing that it's not kind to you, right? If you can step outside of yourself for a little bit and look at yourself maybe as your inner child even, how unkind to make them feel that way by the people you're overvaluing in your life, right? It's not very kind. Even journal as your inner child or have a conversation with your inner child when you're journaling. I think this can bring up a lot of emotions and remind you that it's not really about you in the present moment. It's also about your past self, and it's also about your future self. We're kind of interlinked with all these versions of ourselves, and the decisions we make now, the people we bring into our lives now affect all of those parts of us. So, again, it's not to shame or blame or put like pressure on you. It's just to give you some perspective on how this can affect you and what this can do for your relationships to others, but also to yourself, how you see yourself. And then that affects your self-trust and the way you then show up in life, right? Because if you are bringing people into your life or you're gravitating to people who don't see your value, because that's the dynamic, right? That's the paradigm. You won't trust yourself anymore. You won't trust yourself to be somebody who brings good people into your life, or maybe not good, but like aligned people. I'm not saying these people are bad necessarily, but aligned people into your life. And if you can't trust yourself to do that, you won't be able to trust yourself to do other things that require your awareness and alignment. So it's just important in general to be able to understand, okay, this stems from a lack of value I see in myself. This is the kind of person I gravitate towards. How do I feel about that? How does it make me feel about myself? Does it make sense for me to be here if I were to start practicing having more self-worth and self-value? Really be honest with yourself and be mindful of the effects it has. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. I hope it gave you some perspective on the concept of self-worth, the value you see in yourself, how it affects you. If you want to talk about these things in more depth with me, feel free to book a call over on my website. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok for my short form content, and subscribe to my Substack, which is my newsletter, because I'm always writing over there. I also have a fiction Substack. I don't really promote this one as much, but I write some short fiction on there as well. So if you want to read some of my work, whether nonfiction, fiction, go find me on Substack. Other than that, thank you for being here, and I'll be back again soon with another episode.